goodness. Big move Monday. Look out. A way to end the tournament.
So what's happening, people? Welcome back to the Quad Pod, sponsored by Poseidon Strength and Adidas Wrestling. Make sure you're using those discount codes at checkout. Specifically, right now, if you are looking to get some wrestling gear from Adidas Wrestling, make sure that you put in your order, because the 17th, which is tomorrow when you guys are watching this, is the last day for ground shipping if you want to make sure that it is there before Santa arrives. So if you want to make sure that your gifts do come before Christmas, make sure, one, you're utilizing our discount code QP25, and then you're also getting in those orders by Wednesday, December 17th, and you'll get everything in time for Christmas. So make sure you guys are doing that. We greatly appreciate it too, because it means you guys are supporting us and you're listening to everything that we're saying. But make sure you do use those discount codes and get that done so that you get those gifts before Christmas. As always, it's awesome to be joined by Robbie, Austin, and Kevin. I am Holmes. This is episode 36, is obviously the Jerome Bettis episode, and we are going to talk about refereeing. We're also going to talk about some of the really good duels that happened last week. And honestly, some good refereeing, some bad refereeing. But then some of the really good duels, some of the matches that didn't happen that we thought were going to happen, some of the ones that did that were really, really great as well. But first, we have to do our weigh-in. And to weigh in, as I said, we're going to talk referees, and mine goes right back home to the Lehigh Valley. The Easton versus Nazareth duel is one of the more epic duel meets ever since I was growing up, when I was a kid. I didn't wrestle in either one of them. I wrestled both schools, but never in this duel meet, mostly because I went to a different school. But there were just always just epic wrestling matches. I got to wrestle in one, Easton versus Wilson, my high school, when I was younger in high school. And then, like I said, Easton versus Nazareth. And I'm guessing by this point, most have seen the clip of the defensive fall that Flow Wrestling posted of an Easton wrestler pinning himself. And the referee, his name is Tony Phillips. And Tony reffed my entire wrestling career. Like, from the time that the singlets were like really thick and not stretchy to my senior year of high school, when, you know, we got some better ones, I guess I should say. And he has been making calls like this for as long as I can remember. He watches literally everything, doesn't really miss much. Whereas I think some referees would have missed it looking to count back points or whatever else. Tony's looking at everything. And while people may not have agreed with the call being made, it was the right call to make. So my shout out is going to go to Tony for always being the guy that wasn't really afraid to make calls like this, even in some of the biggest times. And you can see in the clip, I actually literally have it running as I'm talking about it. You can see in the clip, he doesn't see it at first. The kid actually pins himself twice. And Tony recognizes it the second time and then calls the fall and points to what he was calling. And it was, you know, it's an epic clip. I'm so glad that the crowds are back at 25th Street Gym at Easton High School. I'm glad that they are back wrestling there. I know for a while they were wrestling at the middle school, but this duel is always epic, always an epic ending. I know last year there was another crazy ending to the duel meet as well, and this just throws it into the record books. So shout out to the hometown, still packing the same gym that Austin and I wrestled in growing up, as well as the Easton Nazareth duel still being crazy amazing. My high school coach is actually the head coach at Nazareth now, Dave Kroll. So shout out to that family as well. Those guys have always been awesome to me. Hopefully I get a chance to see him when I'm home for Christmas. But yeah, this clip, you know, when you see your hometown in a clip like this and you're like, that ref's been doing that my entire life. It's kind of funny that now the national scene realizes that he's been doing it. It's pretty funny. Austin, on to you.
Yeah, Nazareth, Easton, just to piggyback off your line there, I think that was the one that ended in a headgear throw last year.
Mm-hmm.
Deducted a team point, and then they went into tiebreakers and all that. So yeah, it's always a fun big event.
I don't think that was Tony though. Thank God that wasn't Tony.
That wasn't Tony, no, but it was same two teams. Yeah, and
yeah.
I've been booed by both those fan bases in my own gym, in their gym. So
have you been booed by the ref though?
Maybe not that I know of. Maybe behind my back he booed me, but Tony wouldn't do that. Tony's awesome. Yeah, that's a good shout out, Holmes. I'll give my shout out to Coach LeBlanc at Binghamton. Just secured his first win as a first dual meet win as a Bearcat head coach this weekend when they beat Bloomsburg. What was that score? 24-13. Pretty dominant. Seven duels to 3. So yeah, they won that one, and they'll be back in action this coming weekend here. So short one for me, but I feel like a first win for a head coach is a big deal. It doesn't really get discussed much. And I just tweeted out a little bit ago, it's going to be the first of many for Coach LeBlanc at Binghamton. You got good stuff coming up on the horizon. I feel like his hire didn't get talked about much either, because it came, what was that, like mid September, almost October when it happened. So everything was kind of ongoing, so didn't get much coverage, but shout out to Coach LeBlanc and congrats.
Yeah. Robbie, on you.
I'm going to give a shout out to, Mark Branch and Wyoming. Had a hell of a atmosphere for Penn State coming into Laramie. Over 4,000. I think it's like 4,350 something. Adam Engel tweeted the attendance, and shout out to him. I mean, if you don't follow Adam, he's a great reporter out there. Does a fantastic job covering Wyoming and other teams out in the Mountain West area. But the environment was awesome. I don't know, I've ever seen that many fans in the arena there. And I mean, with Penn State coming in, it's going to be a tough duel. Number 1 team in the country for a reason. And it was 8 matches before Wyoming won one, but they won the last 2 with Novak and Christian Carroll. And the other part of that shout out is to Christian Carroll. He had a really good quote afterwards about how he feels at home and feels kind of embracing the life in Wyoming and how it's different. And, I'm just glad that he's found a place that he feels comfortable, and he's performing at a level we haven't seen him at in college, and kind of what we've expected from him. We knew it was possible from him. And I think Mark and company have done a great job making him into, a legit All-American threat at heavyweight.
Yeah, I think we said last show that it was great that not only did he find like a home, but he's in the right weight class now too, after being down at 97. So it's pretty awesome.
He's big too. He is not a small 285.
Yeah. Claunch, on you.
I'm just picturing Christian Carroll like Mark Madsen in Kill Bill 2, where he's just living in like a trailer in the middle of like the hills, being a bouncer at a strip club. He's never going to do that. He's better than Mark Madsen, brother and assassin in Kill Bill. Anyway, my shout out, it's a double shout out today. So I got a text Wednesday from Frank Beasley, head coach at George Mason, who would listen to the podcast. And I had referenced last week about the commentator for Bellarmine. And Frank followed up and said, "Hey, that's Fred Minnick. He does the commentary for Bellarmine. He's awesome. He's the man in bourbon. He just started doing it this year." But yeah, so he's just awesome. So then I did Google him, and Fred Minnick is an American wine and spirits writer. He began professionally writing about wine and spirits in 2006. He helped found Bourbon Plus, which covers the bourbon industry. Since 2013, Minnick has worked with the Kentucky Derby Museum to present the Popular Legends series of bourbon. Minnick wrote Whiskey Women, The Untold Story of How Women Saved Bourbon, Scotch, and Irish Whiskey. So
I have very different stories about whiskey and women.
I mean,
for another podcast, Robbie.
I was gonna say, I bet his apartment smells of leather-bound books and fresh mahogany as well.
I imagine it probably does. And again, based on his enthusiasm, maybe he was sipping some bourbon while doing it. No, I'm kidding. He did a great job though, so I wanted to shout him out and Frank Beasley for listening to the pod and for filling the holes in my own research. So shout out to those guys, appreciate that. And
a quad pod bourbon.
We should do a quad pod bourbon.
Yeah.
That would be
Frank did their
fantastic.
bourbon release for their uncommon bourbon for Patriot Wrestling Club.
That's right.
I've heard it's pretty delicious. I was not there.
Yeah. Claunch, didn't you have a second child? Didn't you say your son did very well in a wrestling tournament this past weekend?
He did, yeah. He placed second. It was a round robin thing. I'll shout out Sparta in general. Derek Rosenberger, he put it on and they did a really great job. It was quick, it was efficient. They had 3 different age groups going, and each age group took about 2 hours. They also had like a foot tag thing going on before then. So we got there at like 1:00. His wrestling started at 2 and we were out by 4. So it was just a really, really well done tournament. So shout out to them. Shout out to Cortland. He wrestled well, little sloppy early on, as you typically are in wrestling when you're getting back into it. He decided early this season that he was going to try to do a lot of like, instead of sprawling, do like lock in the crotch and like roll through stuff. And thankfully I didn't have to say it when he came off the mat, but one of the other coaches, shout out Mitch Herniak, was like, hey, a good sprawl works pretty well. If you just want to get back to doing that, be great. So
yeah. I think it'd be a good idea.
Let's start there.
Yeah. Let's stick with the fundamentals before we go full Seth Gross, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. And before we get to our topics, I think Robbie, was it you that said Garland is coming up on a milestone win or had a milestone win over the weekend too?
Yeah, it's good. Hopefully this weekend. They have Bloomsburg. Let me look at their schedule real quick. But they have a quad this weekend.
Yeah, that's up at Bucknell.
Yeah, Bucknell. I knew it was a B. There we go.
Morgan
And
State,
Coach Garland
Bucknell,
is going for his 200th dual victory as the UVA head coach, which is phenomenal. And I could sit here and talk all day about good things about Steve as a person, as a coach, someone who means a lot to me, and living here in Charlottesville. And when I moved here, I got involved with the club and known Steve for a long time now. And he's certainly an asset to UVA, being an alum and knowing the rigors of the school and recruiting there. And he's done a hell of a job. I won't speak too negatively about some of the support he receives, but suffice to say they could be better supported by their administration. And he does a good job working around that and making the best of the situation. This year, for an example, they have their wrestling room and their competition gyms under renovation, so they're making do with what they got to do, and they're only hosting 3 matches this year. So it sucks for them that they're not going to get to spend a lot of time at home, but he's making the best out of it for his guys, and he's coming up on a huge milestone. So I'm happy for that, and I think celebrating what he's done in his time at UVA is important.
Yeah, Steve was awesome. When we did, Spay and I actually stopped by Virginia when at UVA when we were on our Final X road trip years ago. Half the team went to VTech and Spay and I went over to UVA, and he was welcoming, opened the doors, and showed us the campus and everything else, and it was pretty awesome to.
Don't get that wrong. They get mad.
Yeah, exactly. The thing, as somebody with an English degree in English literature, I love seeing the Edgar Allan Poe stuff. So I got to kind of nerd out on that stuff at UVA. Yes, I have a degree in English. I'm a nerd. It was actually really easy, so shut up. But it was like I said, Steve is always awesome, and he opened his doors for us, and did interviews and toured us around and showed us the arena as well as the rest of the grounds, as you say. So shout out to him. I'm looking forward to circling back to that one next week and shouting him out when he gets his 200th win. But let's get on to some of the matches and some of the dual meets that took place last week. And we're going to start with Ohio State and NC State. And Robbie, going to come right back to you. What were your thoughts on the duel before we get to some of the individual matches and some of the calls that were made? As you know, I alluded to in the start, we're going to talk refereeing. What was your thought on how NC State wrestled up against Ohio State?
Honestly, they looked kind of flat. They, I think Ohio State won almost all the toss-up matches and kind of had an edge that NC State wasn't able to counter. I was expecting a little bit more out of Matty Singleton after, the performance he had last week with a big win, and he just didn't look himself. And only having 2 wins on the day, I did the bookends, or 3, I guess 3 with Will's win as well. But Vince started off with a really good match, and then it just kind of was stagnant until Will Denny had a kind of controversial finish, which we'll talk about in a minute, but picked up a good win for him. And then my guy Isaac Trumbull looked phenomenal against Feldman. But otherwise, it just didn't seem up for the challenge like you would expect them to be. It didn't seem like the team I was expecting. That's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah. Now the match at 149, Bisgins and Styles. So if you haven't seen the clip, I think Piles was the one that posted it. If you didn't watch the match or anything else, but Bisgins locks up a cradle and rolls it through, and it was a funky situation. Styles sat up through the situation. You never really see anything like this, but
crazy core strength.
It really was it was an insane sequence of events. But Bisgins, who took the wrestling that direction, ends up on his back, arching, but in control with a cradle, and then ends up giving up a takedown, as they call neutral danger, on him, which is wild, honestly, because, especially, we just talked about a good call on an offensive guy being on his back. This was a bad one. For me, when the head scratcher for me was the fact that Styles is broken down when the cradle locks up. And for the longest time, or at least for the last, I don't know, however many years, you lock up a cradle and a guy's broken down, that's a takedown. So that should have been where the points came from for Bisgins to start with. But they allowed the sequence to keep going, and that's where it went all squirrely, and a neutral danger was called. Claunch, did you see this sequence, and what were your thoughts on it when you saw it?
I did, and it's a takedown. It's a takedown. If we start auditing cradles and takedowns and what we've all decided, and by decided I mean is in the official's book, is a takedown. If we start auditing situationally what's going to happen, we're going to just be in a complete. I'm going to not swear this early in the podcast. It's just going to be an absolute disaster.
Gotcha.
All right.
It's going to be a shit show.
We can't do this. And now there are certain situations. Let's say if you lock up a cradle, right? But you're too far out in front and you're not you haven't put them down to their hip. There's certain situations, yes, where it is not. This was the situation where it should have been called a cradle. And if we're going to start giving, these crazy reaction times and everything else, it's just going to be an absolute nightmare. That should have been called a takedown. And if you're going to then have continued points from there when the situation changes, that's what reversals are for, right? That's what, you can get a reversal and then get near fall. And but once you have to call the takedown when it's a takedown, because these guys are all too good to allow just continuation all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Austin, when we came on, we were kind of talking through it before we came on. What were your thoughts on it? You had kind of a different take a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's a takedown. I agree with everything Claunch said. I think if Biskins just stays in that cradle with Styles on his hip, I don't think there's any controversy. But the fact that Biskins maybe tried to go for the pin and maybe got a little too high and got rolled through with his own momentum there, that maybe held the ref to say, well, wait a minute, we're still wrestling here. It's a different position. And that's when the neutral count came in. But yeah, I mean, if you just look at that and see Styles in a cradle on his hip, that's a takedown every day. I'm not sure why it wasn't there. The fact that the continuation happened, okay, that's fine, but it should still be a takedown and then reversal, pretty much what Claunch said. So I'm not sure why it wasn't a takedown. I think, and I don't like to harp on refs too much, but sometimes you have to. But also, there's a lot of rules for these refs to look out for. You know, it's like in the basics of basic knowledge, that is a wrestling takedown. But now the fact that it's, what is reaction time? Is there reaction time anymore? Like, that's the stuff that's like, it's too deep in the weeds. It's a takedown. Call it a takedown. Get the right call, and let's get moving on here. I think you slow it down and look at it. It adds too many different layers.
I have it on good authority that most officials think that should have been called a takedown.
I would imagine so, especially after review, and they didn't overturn that. I mean, how do you look at that and
the
say
hard
it's not
part.
a takedown? Yeah.
Yeah, I was
That
going to
was
say,
the hard
let's
part
hear
for
from
me.
somebody that likes harping on referees. I know Robbie's got a
I'm
lot.
good at it. I'm good at it. Oh, well, according to somebody this weekend, I don't watch enough wrestling, so I don't.
Yeah,
I
we'll
don't
get to
know.
that one too. You don't watch enough, nor do you know
No,
about the
I
consistencies
don't.
of referee or the inconsistencies of referees.
Yeah.
I think what frustrated me is that, I mean, we talk about it all the time. If refs are looking at their own calls, how often are they actually going to change it? Are they going into it with an open mind? Do they already think that this is what I saw? I'm not going to change what I saw. It's hard to. I think if we were to look at the data, and I'm sure somebody has that. There's the wrestling data guy. Pirates probably got information on it. How many times is a call overturned? And my problem with it, and I think kind of what Austin said, is he looked for like a continuation in a sequence, so there shouldn't have been continuation. If anything, it should have been 3 and then reversal once he got to that weird spot. And like when he got held in danger, which I would like to see another camera angle, because it's hard for me to call danger from the camera angle that we saw, because we can't tell where his back's at. And if we're not going into it with an open mind, and he's looking at this continuation rather than when it started, he's not going to change it, because he says, this is when it happened. I'm not going to look back 5 seconds when I should have called it the first time. But if I don't know, it's frustrating to see calls made that should be pretty obvious. I mean, I think the vast majority of wrestling people, even some Ohio State fans, you take the bias away and they're going to make the same call. Like, that should have been a takedown. But we're not, I don't know, it feels disingenuous when we go look at calls and it's not an independent review. I would love for there to be an opportunity for independent review. Clearly, we're not a big enough sport to have like the control center like they have on Saturdays for college football. But I would love for there to be something in place for that.
Yeah, but they're allowed to have independent review. They're just choosing not to. That's the thing, is they have already instituted that. It's more so school not wanting to pay for an independent referee to do independent
Ohio
review.
State doesn't have enough money.
Yeah,
they certainly don't have enough money to pay for that.
No,
and that's something I think, like, in all honesty, for a big duel like that, you're talking about a top 10 duel, make it the best situation possible. Bring in an independent reviewer. So we're taking away that bias, because there's at least two calls in this duel that were pretty controversial. One went for Ohio State, one went against Ohio State. So I don't know. It would be nice to have that in place, especially for big duels like that.
Yeah, and for me, this sequence was 2 parts. The sequence changes for me, in my opinion. He's coming out the back door, trying to score a takedown, ends up, turning over his left shoulder. And as he turns down, he locks up a cradle. That is where sequence 1 should have been over and done with. It's basically like him coming out the back door and going around and scoring a takedown normally. Only this one ends in a cradle being locked up, and then he rolls it through. It's like, how the hell did we get there if he didn't have control to some extent in this situation, right? Like, he had to get there somehow. It wasn't like they just rolled over and now he's on his back. Like, he locks up a cradle and rolls it through, and you see who has control of that. The way that the sequence ended,
him in near fall, and that's why he.
that's the weirdest thing is it's two separate sequences and it was called as one. And then the fact that it was then reviewed and not changed, where you can clearly see the cradle locks and it's like 1,000 and then he rolls him through. Like it's two sequences. And the fact that that wasn't seen is just insane. There was the other sequence that you were talking about is with the Will Denny and Paddy Gallagher match. And that one was more stalling. And Robbie, this is the one that you were told you didn't watch enough wrestling. So what were your thoughts on this one?
I don't know. The guy who said it was arguing that, this is the same situation that Patty got called for in the national duels when he got called for stalling and sudden victory and lost his point there, that he wasn't allowing the guy to come back in, and he was saying that Denny wasn't allowing him to come back in. To me, this comes down to the same thing that we've been talking about. There's so much inconsistency in stalling, and they keep going back to these edge rules and relying on these edge rules, and that's what they're really being specific about. I mean, by the rule of the book, that looked like stalling to me. He went out of bounds, Denny shot him out, and that's what they've been calling.
What it used to be too.
But yeah, but I mean, I understand why Ohio State fans are upset, and they feel like Gallagher's getting called for stalling in both positions. But the reality of it is, if he's giving up stall points, that means that's at least his third stall call. So he had two other opportunities to not fuck that up. And if we're getting to the third one, we got points up, right? So I don't know. If you look at that match, there's a lot of other opportunities that they very likely could have called stalling before that and not even gotten to sudden victory. But that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, it's a weird sequence of events. However, the application was done correctly. But I do agree in the inconsistency, and we've harped on it a number of times. The inconsistency of referees is just ridiculous at this point because they have forgotten what traditional stalling was. And it's being looked at as, is it an action call or is it stalling now? That's where they're looking. Is he pushing him out or is he trying to get back in? Like it's become edge stalling, and that's it. You see more of that on the edge than you do in the center when the shot differential is 6-1.
It's like the opposite of what we saw from Jesse Delgado. Like he was so good about playing the edge and making it to his advantage. And now it's like guys are playing the edge to try to get the other guy a stall call. Like they're turning back in and shooting him out versus just circling to the center and wrestling and making that a point scoring boundary, kind of like freestyle, where we're basically having a passivity zone now because they're so reliant on those edge calls.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Claunch, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that like any of these stall calls aren't coming out of the blue, right? Refs are talking to these guys during the match. Like, hey, if you shoot him out of bounds again, like it's not, you're not using that as an attack. Like, stop doing that, or, hey, you're backing out. Like, there was an action call there, but you got to circle in, right? Maybe it's not as detailed as I just put it there, but they're not just going like, oh yeah, crazy. Like, didn't see that coming, did you? Like, no. And especially if you're Paddy Gallagher, like, you got to know what you're doing here, man. Like, I watched Will Lewan. He figured out how to do it and not get called for stalling by the time he was a junior and senior. He had to figure out a way to wrestle in those positions, circle in and win matches with a primarily defensive approach, but still be able to kind of dictate the pace. And like, I'm partly joking, but like, I remember like texting buddies being like, how is he getting called for stalling while losing the fucking match? We're further into the podcast. I can swear now. But it would happen all the time. And like, he had to get better at it. So like, dude, Patty, get better at it. Like, this is not, you can't lose 2 matches in a month the same way. Like, that's tough. Maybe my timing's off. Maybe within the same season, it's still tough.
Yeah. I mean, you're right though. You gotta figure it out. I'm just still baffled by the inconsistency, and I shouldn't say baffled. I'm honestly not that surprised, But the inconsistency of refereeing is it's just laughable at this point, though, because you're seeing each referee apply the rules, or at least stalling, so differently. Could you imagine? Like, yes, it does certainly happen maybe with like pass interference in football, but could you imagine like a false start or offsides being called differently from game to game? Like that would be the most asinine thing ever if it just was applied so weirdly. It just doesn't make any sense sometimes. And this is another one of those head scratching moments for me.
Or if a touchdown was called when his knee was down, clearly like a yard short of the end zone, and then they reviewed it on primetime yesterday, and they still called it a touchdown, and then the game came down to a touchdown, that would suck.
That would suck.
If it was your team.
Yeah, it would. Fresh wounds. Austin, your thoughts on the Patty Gallagher situation and the stall call?
Yeah, I was sitting here watching. I saw the clip out of a vacuum, like just a clip. Didn't see any of the match, and it did look like stalling. Going back and watching it, I still think it looks like stalling, but I think it's a little ticky-tack for that situation. They're in overtime, two highly ranked guys. It's not 1-1. What was it, 5-5? Like, these guys have scored already. That's one where it's like Claunch said, the guy goes out, it's like, hey, guy, that's on you. You got to circle in next time or find a way to do better. But again, it's one of those things like, okay, I see the application. I see it's called that way. Is it correct? Probably, but maybe not in that situation. I just think it's one of those situations, like, what do you want Gallagher to do? He's getting pushed out of bounds with an underhook. You push in too hard, you get counterattacked, you get thrown, right? You can't just back out of bounds. Fight a little harder. Yeah, it's one of those weird ones, man. It's how can you be consistent with that, though, when every ref kind of sees something differently? If you're on this side of the body, you can see he's trying to keep his other foot in, and if you're on the other side, vice versa. It's tough. But again, I see the call. I agree with it. Maybe just not in that application to end a match. Yeah, I don't know.
It's hard though, because we can't complain about them being inconsistent and then say don't call this penalty when we
exactly.
See it.
Yeah, I'm talking myself into a corner. I feel like an idiot, but it's one of those calls where it's like I could have seen it go either way. I wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I it wouldn't matter to me. It was one of those things. Okay, that's the call, but we got to start calling it that way everywhere. I agree.
Yeah. I think that's been my issue all year, is that they don't know what the call is going to be. Make the call if it's the call, but it needs to be that same way between refs, between matches, between duels. It needs to be consistent, and not knowing what to expect at any given time in the same situation doesn't make for a good product.
And sometimes you literally see them thinking, like, you can see them contemplating, like trying to assess the situation as they're making the call, instead of just, is it the right call or isn't it? And when they try to assess the situation in the moment of like, this is overtime, I'm going to, let this one just ride out in overtime, or, I'm not going to call this in overtime, or, some guys are like, no, I'm just going to call it as it is. You can see them reacting to the situations. And that's what takes away my confidence in them, because if you aren't just reacting to what's going on, and you don't have to assess the situation of what's going on, it makes your calls at least stand up a little bit, because you're applying the rules the way that they should be applied. But when you see guys go out of bounds, and everybody looks to the ref like, is this going to be an action call, or is this going to be stalling? And you can literally see them thinking about the situation that they're in before making a call. It's like, man, like, have some conviction. If you're going to make the call, then go ahead and make it. Claunch, did you have something else?
The last piece I wanted to say is, and this is, there's varying degrees of quality with refereeing, right? So depending on conference and scheduling and all this sorts of stuff, you might get somebody you're not familiar with, and therefore not familiar with the tendencies and how they call things. We started this podcast by shouting out a dude that you guys have known for a while, and you kind of have an idea of what he looks for and how he sees wrestling matches. We see a lot of the same officials at a lot of the same big duels.
Oh yeah, everybody was able to say that this is Angel in the comments, which is the crazy thing.
So we know what people are going to call sometimes based on who they are and what we've seen.
Not if
frequently.
it's Angel, you don't.
Is he in Carver Hawkeye or is he not?
Fair enough. But I guess my point is, there's you can study tape of opponents and you can, people kind of have an impression of what's going to happen. And even having an impression that it's going to be wildly weird is also an impression, right? It's like the song Free Will by Rush. Like you can choose not to make a choice, but that's still a choice, So there's that.
That was a segue. So let me point out one other thing I was impressed with, and we can use this to move into another duel. So I saw two very different situations with reviews this week. In the Ohio State duel, the refs were seemingly getting bullied by both coaching staffs during reviews. On the Bisgins review in particular, after Pat threw the block, Stieber and Jaggers were both over on the NC State side in Angel's ear before he even went to the monitor. Don't feel like we should have that, right? That should be an independent thing. If NC State's challenging it, they should explain what they're challenging. Refs should go over and look at the monitor without feedback from either coaching staff. We saw the complete opposite at Rutgers, where they had like goons hired who blocked off the coaches and didn't allow them to go towards the table when the officials went to review.
Well, it's
which
Jersey,
I really liked. They had their union.
The goon ratio is very high.
I know.
But they did. They had security guys right there on the edge of the tables, and when they went for review, they stepped there so the coaches couldn't go up to the table. And I think that's a great situation. It allows more freedom for the refs to actually look at it without being, influenced at all by other coaching staff. And I think that's the way it should be.
Everybody needs a couple goons. I think that's moral of the story on that one. Speaking of goons, let's head to Wyoming and Penn State, where Christian Carroll, that absolute goon, comes through, and you shouted him out, Robbie, in our start, but he really does look like he's coming into his own, and he looks very strong. He looks like he's in the right space and in the right weight class, as we've already said. But the overall duel, we expected Penn State to be Penn State, but the Mirasola brothers lose at 97 heavyweight to finish things off. Overall, what are Robbie? I'm going to come back to you because you shouted this out. Plus, you're a Wyoming guy. What were your thoughts on the duel, on the result, on Novak and Carroll being quite a hell of a 1-2 punch?
I mean, overall, I liked Wyoming's approach. I think they kind of went after it. They weren't scared. They attacked. They got the first takedown a few times in matches where they were very, very overmatched. I mean, they knew it was going to be a tough matchup going in, and didn't seem to back down at all, and went out and went after it. We knew that the last three matches were going to be the best with Nittany and then Novak and then Carroll, and those were the best three matches of the duel. And I think Joey Novak's just continuing to show that he is, a real contender towards the top of the podium, and Carroll's certainly entering that conversation. So I was impressed overall with how they approached it.
Yeah. Kevin, your thoughts on this duel?
PJ Duke, pretty good.
Turns out
he was, yeah. And he wasn't wrestling like, Jared Hill's been in college for 6-7 years, right? God, I hate when I say that now. I hate when I say 6-7 now, and it's never on purpose.
Yeah.
I just hate it. Anyway, damn it. Got to change how I talk. But yeah, Hill's multiple time national qualifier, and Duke just took him apart. I tried that Navy ride cradle pin thing that Marcus Blaze did. I did that to my son after practice today. That was pretty sweet. I'm gonna work on that a lot more. That's a great. I love Navy rides in general are fantastic. They really are
It's
not
a
bring 'em
very
back.
underrated.
I
Oh,
remember working on those all the time when I was younger.
and you find
Forearm
yourself in them
being
all the
sore
time,
as shit.
especially when you're a kid. Like, why are you abandoning that position? It's a position of strength, and then they're just like, I don't know what to do, and they like panic and then let the guy up. Anyway, I'm gonna work on that this week with the kids, I think. In general, like great, and I love watching Joey Novak. I've referenced it before, but I've been following that program pretty closely since Novak's freshman year. And if you weren't following, you don't know how huge these leaps were as far as like him, filling out into the weight class first and foremost, and building the confidence that he has in his attacks. I mean, I don't even think we referenced this, but like when he lost that match to Elam, and he was so pissed off when he gave up a takedown on the edge of the mat at one point, he just like punched the mat, was like, fuck. Like he was so mad. And so it's just like, I love that. He knows he belongs there, and he knows he needs to get over the hump against those people. So leaving no doubt against Mirasola and really, kind of imposing his will on him was pretty awesome to see.
Yeah. I want to kind of, I guess, pivot. We've talked about Wyoming, Penn State a little bit. I want to pivot to EIWA stuff with Austin. What kind of things were you paying attention to that happened in the EIWA over the past weekend?
Pretty quiet in the conference, actually. I think a lot of finals were going on. Army wrestled.
We got a bunch of smart guys.
Bunch of nerds, right? Army, West Point, they wrestled Indiana pretty tough. They had some starters out. They lost 26-14. Nothing really to talk about there too much. I mean, Braden Basile at 41 beat Henry Porter. Porter was around to 12 last year, 2 years ago maybe. Won that nice run, so that's a good win for him. I mentioned Binghamton had a win over Bloomsburg. Drexel wrestled Rutgers. Actually, 2 nice wins came out of there. Kyle Waterman at 133 knocked off Dylan Shalver of Rutgers. 5-4 win. Good win for Waterman coming back from injury. And then the other upset was Luke Nichter at 157. He beat Anthony White in overtime. And weird because they met at Keystone Classic and White majored Nichter. So Nichter got a little revenge there. And the match I was looking forward to, and that one was 174, Pinto and Queen. That was in tiebreakers at the finals of Keystone Classic. Queen was up 3-1, kind of got thrown to his back and pinned there by Pinto. So it looks like Pinto's back to his old form, which is good to see if you're a Rutgers fan.
Maybe
about
not.
that.
No, not really.
Yeah,
he ended his weekend on a good note. Certainly didn't start his weekend on a good note.
That's true. Yeah. He lost. Yeah, he dropped one up to Oklahoma, right?
Yep. Yes, he did.
That was a tough one.
Did.
Yeah. Both Oklahoma as well as Ohio State had guys wrestling their old teams. Ohio State had Fishback that was wrestling against NC State, which is funny because if you go to the box score on NC State's, like the results and the recap on NC State's website, and you know how it normally like highlights the guys that are like on their rosters for that match with Fishback, it highlights both of them. So it's like it's very funny because he's still like in their system. But then Saldana was up against Rutgers.
That was a fun match.
Obviously now wrestling, for OU, and he was up against Rutgers. What did you guys make of that one? Austin, what were your thoughts on OU versus Rutgers?
Well, that was a really good duel, just up and down the lineup. A lot of back and forth, a lot of close matches that kind of went either way, and came down to Juan Mora of Oklahoma, who sealed the deal over Kaka there, which is fun. But yeah, Cartagena Walsh and Soldano, for how many times they wrestled in the room, I was kind of, maybe not because it's Soldano, but typically that's like a 1-1 match going to tiebreakers. You don't want to make a mistake. But these guys were throwing up, takedown here, back points here, takedown here. It was really fun to watch those two wrestle, and another controversial takedown call, which we can or cannot get into. But it was ultimately decided the match, which is crazy. But yeah, fun match overall. I would watch that one again. It was entertaining.
Yeah. Same thing happened with Soldano on the Rutgers website. He's obviously wrestling for
That's
OU,
funny.
but his name is highlighted on the OU website. Claunch, your thoughts on OU and Rutgers over the weekend?
So, yeah, I'll comment on that takedown first. It wasn't a takedown, and people are like, "Oh, I thought we did this with Logan Stieber and Jordan Oliver, and like that's a takedown." It's like, no, they're very different positions. Like Stieber was sitting on his butt with his legs straight out, flat, and split. And in the situation with Soldano, like his legs at one point were straight out, but he then turned his hips, got his legs back underneath him, got up onto his knees, and was able to fight through that position. There was no control of the legs to the point where they were split, where there was actually like legitimate control by Cartagena Walsh there. So
I think it depends on how you determine reaction time. Because it would be a lot of reaction time to allow for him to get his legs back out from underneath.
Yeah,
and
fair.
Get those legs back. So
I thought that there was enough. I thought that he did it in enough time to justify the no call. I wouldn't have thrown a fit.
Of a 40-year-old versus a reaction of a 20-year-old.
Right. Well, I wouldn't have thrown a fit if they gave a takedown. But I think if you don't give the takedown, then you stand by the call. At that point. Especially, watching replay, like it's hard to overturn your call if you're watching it slower and you're like, judging the feet at that point. You're like, oh, look at that. So either way, I thought it was good, but yeah, they were 19.5-point favorites, Rutgers, and lost the duel. That's bad. That's several things went wrong.
Not good, Bob.
At home, at Jersey Mike's. Imagine how pissed off Danny DeVito must have been.
Nick Costco was not happy.
No, understandable.
But no, I mean, it was a great night either. So,
right. I need to know though. When are we going to tell people how great your joke was? Is now the time? It was
fantastic.
Yeah. You can. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I was dying, and then I'm glad I didn't say this next part too. So we're all kind of texting as this duel's going on, and it gets down to the heavyweight match, obviously. Oh, now I got to find it. Here it is. All right. So Austin goes, Oklahoma just needs one more win. And it was so fucking funny in the moment. One more is obviously up next. He texts that, and I'm dying laughing. So here's the part I didn't tell you guys, was that later that night, maybe not that much later, like probably as the match was getting ready to start, I say to my wife, I go, Elise, you have to listen to this. And I go, Elise, there's this wrestler for Oklahoma. His name is Juan Mora. All right. And he's going up to wrestle in this match. My buddy texted, and she interrupts me and she goes, I couldn't care less about this. You don't need to finish this story. And I go,
are you talking to my wife? Because that's what
this
is
good. This is good. You need to hear this.
I go, trust me, you want me to finish this story. I go, so anyway, they're going down to this last match to see who wins the duel. My buddy texted, Oklahoma just needs one more win. And she legitimately laughed. And then was like, and then followed up with like, who said that? That's really funny. It's like Austin. Austin did.
I'm good for a few every now and then, but not many.
Well done, sir.
Just a glimpse into the group text. There's always something happening in the group text. There was actually so much happening in the group text this weekend that I had to mute my phone because I was like in the middle of like actually like editing video and doing stuff, and I just kept getting the pop-ups on my screen.
Oh yeah.
As I was sitting there, I was like, all right, I gotta mute the guys for right now because there were just like I got back to it. There was like 45 text messages. I was like, this went a little insane. This went a little wild. But yeah, just a glimpse into the group chat. Let's head to the ACC. I know we talked EIWA. Let's head to the ACC. Robbie, what else went on? I know we already got into NC State. Anything else in the ACC that had your attention this week?
Well, let me hit one more thing in that Oklahoma Rutgers duel, and my apologies to D'Anthony Parker, because I was talking some shit about him earlier in the season about him not being as good as his rank was, and he looked incredible this weekend. So
He's good.
My apologies for doubting you, Mr. Parker. Put on a show against Rutgers, and he looks real good. Certainly a threat to be on the podium. And then had a 100 KECA loss in the most 100 KECA way of not finishing a shot when he very much could have many times.
I still can believe that.
Now that's a Big Ten issue, not an ACC issue anymore. So
yeah.
All right. In ACC country, at the same time as the NC State duel, UNC was wrestling and put it on West Virginia. I think it was 27-7 to extend their undefeated start to 6-0. Best start they've had in 30 some years. And they looked great. I mean, won a lot of close matches and, did everything they needed to do and got some good performances out of guys that we maybe didn't expect to win. The big one, let me pull it up quick, that I was super impressed with. Luke Simcox has had a hell of a year so far, and he won a tight one over Jordan Titus. But Laird Root is going to be one to keep an eye on. Had a really close loss to Ty Waters, 6-3, but he's a pretty gritty guy, and he's certainly one to keep your eye on over the next couple of years, because I think he's going to cause some problems. The other one that I was really impressed with in that one was Robert Platt, the 97-pounder, he's off to a good start this year. Good win over Ruin Lawrence, lots of points put up that match. UNC is doing good things. Don't necessarily have the firepower that they may need to make a deep run the ACC, but if they wrestle the way they've been wrestling, they can certainly do it. They have a tough test this weekend. They're going to go out to Nebraska, so we'll see how they perform against a really, really tough team. And the other ACC duel this weekend, there wasn't a lot of ACC action, but Pitt shit-stomped Maryland. That was impressive. What was the final score of that? 3? I think Maryland only scored 3.
35-3.
Yeah, 35-3, and ended with a Dayton Pitzer pin. And they that was supposed to be a close duel. I think the line was 7.5 on that, and it was not close. And I was very, very impressed with Pitt coming off of that. The only win that Maryland got was Braxton Brown at 33, but Briar Priest got a ranked win over Daryl Lemus. Luca Augustine beat Dom Solis, who's been having a good year. Maxed Out had a really good match against Branson John, which was one we wanted to watch. Lots of points put up there, 11-6, and then Dayton Pitzer capped it out with a pin. So good stuff happening for Pitt. Had the win over Lehigh last weekend, Maryland this weekend. Good stuff going for them.
Yeah, and UNC not an easy weekend at all, as you said, they have Nebraska, but then 2 days later they have Northern Iowa. So very tough weekend for them for sure. Claunch, anything Big Ten, any action you saw as well?
Most of what we talked Ohio State. We didn't talk about this. Obviously, Iowa wrestled Chattanooga and Utah Valley. I'm just going to go into my bets because I was 4 for 5 this weekend, and that seems more important.
It was a good weekend.
Yeah, the NC State. Yeah, exactly.
Juan Mora messed that up. That was the only one I didn't get.
That was the one I got. I got that one. NC State plus 25.5, Utah Valley plus 34.5 against Iowa. That also got worked. I really wanted to take Chattanooga plus 40.5 against Iowa because I was like, really? That's 10 major decisions, and it still wouldn't cover. Like, that's not going to happen. And it didn't happen, to their credit. Like, plus in duels like that, they're not going to wrestle all their starters, really.
Didn't they bump Gabe Arnold up to 97?
Yeah.
Was that where they did that? The guy cutting to
against Utah Valley, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Army, Indiana is where I lost because I 8.5 was the spread, and I didn't get that. But yeah, Oklahoma Rutgers, and then I took Northern Illinois minus 3.5 against Missouri, and Missouri didn't cover that. So
Yeah, Utah Valley was good for me this weekend. Hit both of them. Got UNI, got NC State, got UNC. It was a good weekend.
yeah, that was most of what I watched. I did see, I think Kent State was wrestling like Buffalo and Gardner Webb. I think Gardner Webb tied Buffalo, and I think Kent State beat Gardner Webb, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
And Kent State beat Binghamton.
Yes, they did.
Good weekend for Kent State.
Yeah, good for them.
Yeah,
happy to kind of see how they continue to develop as the year goes on too, because I know they had a lot of young guys and guys, coming into the team that weren't there last year, whether they were coming from Cleveland State or somewhere else. So that's a team that's going to, round into something pretty dangerous, I think, by the end of the season.
Yeah,
got to say, I'm not a fan of the light blue singlets though. I don't like it.
No.
Remember how awesome they used to be? Like when they were really good, like with Kilgore
Like
and
Dustin Kilgore time?
and they had like, it was like a white middle and then like the blue and yellow kind of like side paneling.
Mm-hmm.
It just said Kent State right in the middle, or those were badass. Those were really awesome singlets, and I was terrified to wrestle them.
I almost committed. Did I ever tell you guys that?
I don't recall if he did.
Yeah, I almost wrestled at Kent State.
What changed your mind for Drexel?
Drexel was just closer to me, and I like the academics.
Dragons are intimidating.
Yeah, that's what it is too. Yeah. But yeah,
Golden Flash or Dragon.
Yeah.
But no, I was happy for them to get that win. That was nice, and again, good season so far for them.
Yeah. Big 12 wise, I was paying attention to Oklahoma State mainly because they were wrestling West Virginia. We didn't see Waters in that duel. He did wrestle Friday, but then did not wrestle on Sunday, and he would have had obviously the tougher match on Sunday, wrestling Robideau, but did not compete at all.
It's the opposite for Strickenberger. He didn't wrestle on Friday, but wrestled on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I would want to be
that's a tough cut for him.
Well rested for a revenge match, and I'm glad that he did that instead. I did not see, however, though, did Spratley celebrate after the win? Was there any guns that came out or anything like that? I know they're really cracking down on celebrations and headgear tosses and all this other stuff, but this was the dual meet last year where Strickenberger just kind of unloaded the clip on Spratley in celebration. I am pro celebration. I am not pro killing your opponent after. So there's that, but Spratley does get revenge on Strickenberger in this year's iteration of it. But then the Waters, I guess most people are saying that he ducked Robideau. I don't know. Do you guys feel like he did? Robbie, you have thoughts on this for sure. Do you feel like he did?
It's weird that he didn't wrestle at home, but he wrestled on the road. I find that a little odd. It's not a hard cut for him. He's moving up weight class, so you don't have the argument of him having to make weight twice like that you would for Strickenberger, who's got hellacious cut from all indications. So I understood him not wrestling on Friday, but wrestling on Sunday. I don't, unless Waters got dinged up, which I didn't see in the match. I mean, it's certainly possible, but I didn't see it in his match against Root. But I don't know. It's weird to me, especially for a conference duel, that you're not going to put out your starters.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think that you would want to. Yeah, there were. Let me see. What was the other one that I mentioned? Oh, and then UNI beating Missouri. That was 22-14. UNI getting the win there, and like you said, I'm very interested to see how UNI and North Carolina match up this week. A good amount of they kind of just mowed him down a little bit. However, that match at 65, Ryder Downey, Max
That was
Mayfield,
crazy.
1-0. 1-0.
Not a score you
So,
see very often anymore.
yeah, definitely not a score that you see very often at all. But yeah, 1-0 in that one. And Cade Moore, Austin, you'd mentioned this before we came on. Cade Moore not able to put the nail in the coffin, hits another flying cement job. Yes, that is exactly what it is called, on Julian Farber, and can't put him away and ends up losing 9-8.
They just teach that guy how to hit that move and pin guys. He might be a little more successful with it because he's 0-2 with it, right? From what we've seen, like
it's got to be a finishing move. You gotta use it as a finisher. And so far, he's 0-2 when he hits this move. So he's got to learn how to finish with it. But
I think he got 6 points on that exchange, maybe even 7, and he lost 9-8. It's like, dude, score more points on top of that, or pin him. You got to do something.
You
Here.
go to
same thing with
takedown
Bird.
here.
You got a big chunk of points and then got spanked the rest of the match.
Yeah,
but he could have pinned Bird. We kind of had Bird pinned, but
yeah, it was definitely dangerously close to having him pinned. Those are really everything that I was looking at. Did you guys have any other matches or duels that you wanted to discuss that we missed? Because if not, we had a question. I'm trying to find it right now from Randall Voorhees on last week's show, where we were talking about what's that? Jason's brother? I think so. I think so. It might be a distant cousin. We were talking about transfers, and we'd mentioned something about how a lot of the not a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but how some of the more high profile transfers, the ones that we have at Iowa and some other places, aren't doing as well in their new schools or at their new schools. And he asked, what impact, if any, does money have on the performance of these transfers? And I said, it's a good question. We'll discuss it on Tuesday, right? What are your guys' thoughts about the money factor with these transfers? And do you feel like there's an impact that the money has on any of these wrestlers? Claunch, I'd love to hear what you have to think about NIL.
I think it's on a case-by-case basis. I think part of it has to do with the amount of money. I think part of it has to do with that wrestler and how much they're looking to cash in versus how much they're still passionate about the sport. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if that you referenced Robbie, the Lachlan McNeil, for example, or I'm using these Michigan guys as examples because I know these to be the case. Or Cardenas or Shane Griffith, like those guys had gotten degrees at where they had already transferred from, like so they had achieved their academic goals at those institutions, and in certain circumstances did not have an opportunity to continue with any eligibility in that school. In the case of Cardenas and Cornell, getting back to the money piece, though, I think it's human nature, to some extent, to if you get some reward for having done this thing before you've actually done the thing, to pull up a little bit, right? Especially in a new environment with new people, maybe, it just culture-wise isn't working, whatever the circumstances are. I think we like to think as wrestlers that we're above that. And it's really easy to point to situations and be like, whatever, work harder, figure it out, or you're disappointing, whatever the circumstance might be. When I don't think that's really fair in a lot of those instances, especially like this is a grind. And sometimes you transfer and you can't control an injury or whatever. I think in certain circumstances, yeah, maybe the money does affect them. Maybe they're just happy to have gotten the money and they're just going to cash out and they're going to sail off into the sunset or go do whatever their professional thing is that they wanted to do. I don't think that anybody, I think it's irresponsible for me to sit here and say that this person did it or that person did it. And I don't think that there's ever any malicious intent from any of those people to have that be the case. I really think that everybody who makes these moves is trying to go to the right place for the right reasons. And if more money happens to be a perk to that, great. But I think there's more positive will in the making these changes and transferring than there is any open expectation, especially when you can to cash out and walk away with your money. But think about this too. We've seen a lot of transfers where people are actually going to more difficult situations than less difficult, right? That's typically the case. You like occasionally you'll see somebody go from one situation to, maybe a lower conference or a less well thought of situation. But for the most part, you're seeing guys go into tougher situations. And I think that that's just more of a reflection of, hey, I want to go show people what I can do on a consistent basis, right? Wrestling for Northern Colorado is tough, but wrestling for Iowa State is a little bit tougher on a week-to-week basis, maybe. So just my thoughts. But case by case is really the probably safest way to answer.
Yeah. Robbie?
Well, I think you have the extremes, right? You take last year, for example, because we had a full year of data. You had Teamer and Parka, who we know that they got a big payday, who didn't pan out. But at the same time, you had Stephen Buchanan and Hendrickson, who both ended the year as national champions. So it's it's kind of hit and miss. Like I don't know how much of it actually has to do with not being motivated after getting paid. I would imagine that if there is a case where a wrestler was kind of on the edge of being burnout and then got a payday, maybe that would cause more of an issue. Maybe that's what we're seeing with Richie Figs, because I think that's one that comes to mind a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the reality is he got a good payday at Arizona State after he won his title. So I don't know how much more he's actually getting to go to Oklahoma State and how much of a difference that's actually making in his pockets. But he certainly doesn't seem to be the same wrestler that we saw a couple of years ago, and doesn't seem to be as motivated. And we've said as much the last few weeks. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I know for some of the numbers that I've heard and know for sure that guys are getting, I would have been willing to make the move, and it would have made me more motivated to wrestle.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a tough situation. And I think we're going to see a bit of a change now with it being more regulated. And I mean, technically more regulated, but we're not going to have these massive paydays like we've had the last few years. They're still going to be there, but it's not going to be as spectacular on the outside.
Mm-hmm. And Austin, you live in the EIWA. In EIWA, there really isn't NIL money. It doesn't happen. So
Not much,
very different circumstances. But like as you see guys that have transferred from different programs into, to Claunch's point, bigger and better, because that's really what it is. You're at normally a lower tier, even if you are a Division I team, you're at a lower tiered team, and you're going to go to a better team where it's only going to get rougher. It's only going to be harder for you to compete at the same level. Do you see this coming into play at all for any of these guys where the money is maybe got them a little checked out?
I mean, you see it with UFC sometimes too, as kind of a parallel, right? These guys make their first title fight and they keep winning, they're making money. Like Conor McGregor is probably a prime example of that. Like make your first couple $1 million, and then the training is kind of an afterthought because you're buying Lambos, you're buying yachts, you're buying all this shit. Obviously not happening in wrestling, right? But the ones that stick out are probably the two Iowa guys this year, and Bailey and Williams. And we mentioned Figs before. And you could say, the money changed these guys. They don't want to compete, but they're also going from, in the Iowa case, guys, Pac-12 into the Big Ten. They're both also moving up a weight, so that is completely different strength of schedule, different completely training, completely different, weight class moving up, right? Moving up weight class isn't easy. Some guys make it look easy, but it's definitely not. So they're struggling a little bit. And a lot of people like to point, especially some Iowa fans who are very calm and collected usually, right? Say, yeah, we overpay these guys, are worthless, blah, 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 bums. But, that's not the case. It's like, hey, they're up a weight class. They're still figuring this out. If it doesn't pan out in March, okay, we'll this talk, but we're still a month of the season. They're growing into the weight, just give it some time. And hopefully it's not the case. I don't want that to be the case. I want guys to get paid and succeed more. But you're not going to get that every time. There's going to be some one-offs, right? So I don't know.
Yeah. Yet to be determined as well.
I want to amend one thing that I said, which was tougher situation, tougher wrestling, tougher school, that sort of thing versus less tough or less highly looked at. I think the other thing, the counterpoint to that too would be like, well, you're going from less money and resources offered to you to more money and resources offered to you. Mm-hmm. And obviously more money is probably one of the things he's asking about, but I think the resources can't be overlooked too. Tougher training partners, potentially, those sorts of things. That's ideally what the selling point is to go to those situations. Now, we also talked about Christian Carroll earlier, who went from 2 institutions in Oklahoma State and Iowa State where he had more money and more resources potentially to Wyoming. Again, probably less of both of those things, but it was just a better fit culturally. So it's just going to be more different for everybody. More altitude, yeah. And he's a short heavyweight, so he's not affected as much.
Yeah. No, I think NIL money is going to have an impact on so many parts of the sport. I don't think that it has gotten to the point now where we're looking at a guy's effort because he got the bag. So I don't know. It's tough for me to say that performance is tied to the effort we see on the mat. I think it is, to Austin's point, tougher for these 2 specific guys. I think they were really the topic of conversation last week. It's tougher for them because they're in new weight classes, they're in new rooms, getting new coaching, new partners. Everything is brand new. So it's a learning curve. And you go from Neil Arisman, who probably had a different style, obviously a different style than the Brands brothers. So I think just getting used to that. And it's the same thing that we talked about with Lachlan. You're getting used to new coaching. You're getting used to being being matched up with different guys in the room and giving you a different feel and seeing how this feels and that. And then on top of that, you're in a completely different weight class too. And which we said, at least I said, Nasir Bailey doesn't look like he's really filling out his new weight class and doesn't look comfortable, but we'll certainly keep an eye on how the transfers do as the season goes on. But I don't think that the money that they've gotten is indicative of like how well they're wrestling or not wrestling or whatever else. I just think that it's a reason why they ultimately transferred, but not the reason why they're there. They're there because they also want to step up in competition and everything else. But no, I think money isn't really that big of a factor when it comes to performance in any of these athletes. Maybe in some bigger sports, but I'm probably biased, right? But I'm hard pressed to say that wrestlers are those same types of guys that get kind of checked out once they see a couple zeros on a check or whatever else. But it is what it is.
Askren was touched on this last week. Go ahead, Robbie.
No, you're good. You're good.
I was going to say, like, Askren was touched on this last week too. It's just take those 2 Iowa guys again, not picking on them. They just happen to be, what we're talking about here. But, you pick those guys out of room. They're not really Iowa style guys, right? Iowa style is a little bit of a different style, more in your face, more moving forward, not super offensive kind of style. And you take Bailey and Jordan Williams, who don't really fit that mold, and you're trying to take them and fit them in this Iowa style. So maybe that's more the issue than the payment. Like I was just getting the best quote unquote, free agent guy from the transfer portal. Maybe they need to go down 2 or 3 levels, 2 or 3 guys and get the guy that's better for their style to make them excel. That's all I have.
That's fair. I mean, you'd say the same thing about Parco too, and teamwork for that matter as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Buchanan fit more into that.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I was going to say that the surprising thing is we're talking about all these transfers and money, and we haven't mentioned AJ Ferrari. And I think the only thing that's changed with him is the number of sunglasses he has, the Tacoma that's in his garage, and the number of steaks he's eaten a day. Otherwise, we're seeing a great performance from him. He certainly doesn't seem to be lagging in effort because of the money, but
Yeah, you're right. It's hard for me to say that the money is tied to effort in wrestling. It just is, but it is what it is. Well, we've reached the end of our recap portion of this week's episodes. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to mention? Maybe there was a question that you had saw on Twitter or in our comment section that you wanted to address. But if not, we'll wrap these things up and we will move to episode 37 and discuss the upcoming weekend. I will be in Nashville for the collegiate duels and collegiate is that what it is? Journeyman collegiate duels, yeah. And
yeah.
I'll be there with my man Fretwell. I think Sean Kenny is also on the call with us too. But there's a couple other duels that we'll get to. So we'll see you guys on Thursday for episode 37. As always, we appreciate you listening and watching the Quad Pod, and we'll see you then. Peace.